Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. That's how you treat a lady, treat a lady, treat a lady, da 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 da, let a real man pick up the slack and treat you with respect, sung out a male voice, as it happily moved around a small field, drawing the attention of all those around it. Shut up and fight back, you bastard! Screamed a feminine voice as it chased after the owner of the original voice. And they say, chivalry is dead, continued the voice, still sounding cheerful as it moved around, allowing all those listening to hear the song as the male-sounding voice sung out without a care in the world. Fight back, TEME! Screamed a blonde-haired girl with blue eyes as she desperately threw punch after punch towards a white-hooded teen who had his hands stuffed into his pockets as he cheerfully sung with only a grin being shown on his face as the hood hid everything but his mouth and chin. Girl, just let your hair down, the world is our playground, sang the voice out once more, dodging a fist towards their chest with a simply twist which then flowed into a spin that ran along the blonde-haired girl's arm, before sending them behind the owner of the fist. Gah! Screamed the girl as her final irritation restraint had snapped as she quickly spun on her heel and sent a long kick towards the singing male's unguarded and open right arm. Seeing this, the male teen hidden within his hoodie simply let out a small smirk before moving his body ever so slightly so that when the leg finally made contact, it simply followed the hooded teen's arm up and over his head in a smooth motion, thus sending the kicker off balance as they overextended their reach. Grinning at this, the white-hooded teen simply moved his butt backwards a bit, thus hitting the blonde-haired girl's own bosom with his own, sending her onto the ground due to the rather awkward position she found herself in after her kick. And that's how you treat a lady, finished off the male teen as he heard the sound of a thump come from behind him. Turning around, the hooded teen let out a small smile as he came upon the sight of a glaring Kasumi Namikaze, who was now sending daggers towards him as she pushed off the ground and aimed a fist to his nose. Waiting till the last moment, Naruto his head to the right slightly before going for a headbutt, which actually managed to hit home as Kasumi's nose came into contact with Naruto's hidden forehead, thus sending her sprawling on the ground as blood began to drip from her now broken nose. Taking a single set of steps back, the blonde-haired teen watched as the girl held her broken nose for a few moments before surrounding her hand with a pale green color, which then readily healed her once moments ago broken nose, to a perfectly shaped one, thus drawing a whistle from Naruto. Niece. Even being a Jinchuriki didn't stop you from gaining amazing amounts of chakra control, although, I kinda doubt you would be able to heal anything larger than minor fractures or slashed muscles and skin. Still, kudos goes to you for your skill. Spoke Naruto with a grin still riding upon his face as he continued to keep his hands shoved into his pockets as he fought against his sister, who was now silently glaring at him. Seeing this, Naruto shook his head for a few moments before removing said hands from his pockets, showing his hands since the start of his sparring match against Kasumi, who simply moved into another taijutsu stance, of which made Naruto sweat drop for a moment. Is this another form of me practically saying the gloves are off or something? Because I didn't mean to do that if I pulling my hands out of my pockets suggested it, replied Naruto as he waved his right hand in a side-to-side motion, causing the girl across from him to narrow her eyes. How did you attain your skills? Of which are on par, if not superior to mine in certain aspects, who taught you what you know? Questioned the girl, causing Naruto to simply let out a small unmuffled yawn as he slouched a bit. Seriously, I'm self-taught, after getting training from Yamato-sensei, the Falcons and just good old experience in my life before this one. Replied Naruto, keeping his past life's knowledge a complete and utter secret. However, this only seemed to irritate Kasumi more as she charged at Naruto with more speed than before, mildly surprising Naruto as he let out a small smile. Bullshit! Screamed the girl as she threw a straight punch towards Naruto's face once more, only for said Naruto to catch her fist without a strain of effort. And with a grin still in place, the teen opened his mouth. Language! Shouted Naruto as he whipped his arm to the left, sending the blonde-haired girl flying through the air, in which she caught herself before using her natural and trained acrobatics to quickly latch onto the ground before using it as a surface of which she pushed off, in which sent the girl heading for Naruto at an incredible rate. Grinning, Naruto actively dodged the charging Kasumi with a twist once more before catching the flying girl by the ankle, of which he then proceeded to drag across his body, halting Kasumi's short flight before smashing his knee into the girl's gut as she was suspended just above Naruto's waist from when he pulled her ankle. Watching as she let out a cough, Naruto clenched the ankle still in his grasp before twisting his body in a circular motion, sending Kasumi spinning along with him before Naruto finally let go of the girl's ankle, which then sent the girl hurling towards the training field's markers. However, much to Naruto's pleasant surprise, Kasumi seemed to recover once more as she used chakra to grab onto the floor and stick her in place, similar in the way that he originally survived being BBQ'd by Kagumi when he first met her during his mission. Letting out a small clap at the move, Naruto watched as the girl once more charged at him, and this time, Naruto also went in for the charge. Once more, Kasumi seemed to go for a straight punch towards his face. As such, Naruto prepared to sail under the attack. However, to his actual, or rather amazed shock, Kasumi actually used her punch as a feint as she lowered her fist across his body before sending her legs up into the air. And when she did, she used the hand she was originally going to punch him with as a pivoting point as she swirled her body on the floor, sending a snapping kick towards Naruto's chest. Letting out an amused grin, Naruto proceeded to bend his back at a perfect 90-degree angle, thus dodging the helicopter kick. However, that left him open for the second attack, which was a heel drop with the added velocity of the helicopter kick's spin. Widening his grin, Naruto quickly bent his back even further before throwing his hands out onto the ground in a handstand position, of which he then used as a balance as he used his legs to swing out from where he originally stood before using them to kick the heel drop away from his face. However, using her hand as a pivot once more, Kasumi used Naruto's kick to increase her spinning speed once more, this time aiming for a sweep at Naruto's head. Blinking at the rather oddly creative, or more precisely impressive unpredictable attack, Naruto pushed his hands against the floor, sending him into the air while also upside down. At this, the blonde-haired girl smirked as she used the sweep to spin herself into a crouching position before she pushed off the ground with a fist directed at Naruto's unprotected face. "Good job," muttered Naruto as Kasumi's fist edged closer and closer towards his hidden face. However, just as it was about to hit, Naruto swiped his hand across, deflecting the hit before he used his hand to grasp onto Kasumi's forearm before using her as a balance. Dragging or rather pulling Kasumi's arm in a random direction, Kasumi's body moved beneath Naruto's still slightly airborne body before he used the rather awkward position of both his and Kasumi's bodies to quickly move into a flip, thus sending Kasumi away while also balancing himself from the throw. Landing on his 2 feet with a small thud, the blonde-haired teenage let out a small smirk while dusting off his jacket as he looked towards Kasumi, who was now letting out a small gasp as she grabbed onto her stomach slightly. "How the hell are you doing that?" questioned Kasumi, only getting a smirk from Naruto as he wagged a single finger towards the slightly panting girl. Now, do you want me to ask about your secrets?" asked Naruto mockingly, causing the girl to narrow her eyes, before shaking her head and raising her arm as she looked towards Iruka, who was now bug-eyed at the rather impressive display of fighting between the two genin. Sure, one of the genin happened to be the daughter of the Yondaime Hokage, but the other. He was just a student who popped up this exact day, and yet, he seemed to be on par, if not better than Kasumi Namikaze, who was the stronger sister between herself and Mito, who wasn't all that far behind her older, by a few seconds, sister. It was actually believed that only Sasuke seemed to be able to keep up with them at all, and yet, here was another student who appeared from thin air, who could also not only keep up, but also surpass the blonde daughter of the Yondaime. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Iruka nodded towards Kasumi. "Yes, Kasumi-sama," asked Iruka, causing the girl to let out a small sigh. I would like to give up. At this rate, I would probably injure myself to a point that it could affect me during the ninjutsu portion when going through hand signs. Although that seems very unlikely, there is still a chance of that happening, and I would rather get full marks than only a few. Replied the girl, causing the students and teacher to fall silent in shock, before actually mentally agreeing with her statement. Nodding, Iruka lifted a single arm up before pointing it towards Naruto, who was now crossing his arms with an irritated aura around him as he glared in the direction of a smirking Kasumi. And the winner is, voiced out Iruka, waiting for something specific to happen, of which Naruto knew what. Like he said, at the end of the fight, he would show his face to the group, and since it was the end of the fight. Letting out an audible sigh, the blonde-haired teen reached up towards the top of his hoodie before grasping onto it gently. Giving a sparing glance towards Kasumi, Naruto let out a small smirk. Are you sure you want me to show who I am, Kasumi? Won't it hurt your reputation or something now that you lost to me? Asked Naruto out loud, only gaining a small shake of the head from the girl as she crossed her arms under her developing bust. To be honest, I'm a little miffed about what you had done to my sister, but now I actually have a true rival since Sasuke was closer towards Mito's strength, thus allowing the two of them to be rivals. Replied the blonde-haired girl as her blue eyes shined slightly, causing Naruto to chuckle for a moment before releasing a small sigh. Well then, hope your pride holds up. Chuckled Naruto as he slowly and agonizingly began to pull back his hood, revealing more of his face, which now was just past the upper part of his lips. With Satsuki and Sasuke, there was nothing much to say, the twins simply gave each other a bored stare. Over-exaggerating blonde. Makoto and Kushina. Oh, I can't wait to see the face of the person keeping up with Kasumi-chan. Maybe if it's a boy I could get them to hook up. Giggled out Kushina as she imagined her baby girl blushing over the possible hooded person, who she was almost positive was a male due to the voice and body structure. Makoto simply let out a small grin as her eyes shifted into their Sharingan form, ready and waiting to record everyone's faces. Hokage office. Well, isn't it interesting? We get to see what the brat looks like. Droned out a bored-sounding voice, not all that bothered or interested if the orange book being held in his hand said anything. Haha, geez Kakashi, who knows, this could be a kid of yours that you never knew about, maybe even the reincarnation of Hashirama or something. Chuckled out Asuma as he awaited for the teen to pull down their hood. Yosh, let's find out who the child is. To be as good as Kasumi-chan and most likely better than Mito-chan they must have a large fountain of youth. Shouted Guy excitedly as he too watched the screen in excitement. Ha, as if, I reckon the girl went easy on them. Replied a voice near the back, which happened to be the voice of one Anko Mitarashi as she chewed on a single dango stick near the back. Who knows? And all we've seen is their taijutsu ability, which speaks nothing about their other aspects. Spoke Kurenai, getting few nods from those around her as they took what she said into account. The hero of the story being a mysterious hooded figure who has the attention of two twin sisters, yes, that will be a goldmine. Shouted a perverted voice, gaining a small twitch from two occupants of the room. One being Minato, who gave his sensei a glare, while the other happened to be a now irritated Tsunade, who smashed said pervert into the ground with a large bump forming on his head. Crossing her arms, Tsunade glanced towards the white-hooded teen for a second before shaking her head. Maybe I could get a full-time apprentice again like I did to Shizune, depending on their control I mean, spoke Tsunade, getting a few looks of shock which then quickly died down as the pervert sprang back up onto his feet with a smile. Bah, why waste your time with the hooded kid? You've seen how much potential Kasumi-chan and Mito-chan have. Just wait. When the two of them hit their prime, they will be the strongest shinobis to live. Boasted Jiraiya as he let out a laugh, gaining a few murmurs of agreements from a few jonins in the room. However, during this, Minato simply sat there silently as he watched the teen pull his hood down. Who are you? questioned Minato internally as he narrowed his blue eyes. Back with the genins. Slowly, ever so slowly, Naruto continued to pull his hood back down, much to the irritation of all those watching as they watched more and more of Naruto's face come into view. However, just before Naruto got towards his cheeks, where a set of hidden fox whiskers were, the teen let out a small sneeze, sending the hood back over his head, at which he let go of his hood and rubbed his nose. Holding his free hand up, the teen let out a sheepish smile, which was the only thing showing along with his chin once more. Sorry, my bad, I totally didn't mean to sneeze just then, I was planning to a bit later when I got a bit more of my hood off. So yeah, sorry about that, but you know, second time's the charm, right? Laughed out Naruto, getting a set amounts of glares from everyone around him, including the two females in the trees and the people all camped up in the Hokage's office. This time, Naruto actually decided to pull his hood down as he gently grasped the fabric of his hood. Letting out one final smile, the teen swiftly brought down his hood while also unveiling his whiskers towards everyone. It didn't even take a few seconds before a mass amount of shock ran throughout all those who were staring at Naruto as he gave Iruka a cheeky smirk. My name is Naruto Hayabusa, nice to meet ya. Grinned Naruto as he let his now blue eyes stare towards Iruka's shocked brown ones. Makoto and Kushina. NNNN Naruto. BB but, how, what the hell just happened Makoto-chan? Screamed out Kushina as she shifted her head from Naruto towards her friend, who simply gave the red-head Uzumaki a large smile. I told you he was surprising. Replied Makoto, gaining a stunned look from Kushina, before she remembered about how she said she would pair her daughter up with the white-hooded teen, which happened to be her son Naruto. Shivering slightly at the really odd thought, Kushina seemed to realize something as she looked over towards Makoto. Wait, did he say his name was Naruto Hayabusa? Hokage office. Naruto? Asked Minato as he stared directly towards the grinning visage of his son as he stood there out in the open with his blonde hair and blue eyes staring out towards Iruka, who seemed to be in a shocked stupid state as he stared towards the kid who held the Kyuubi's soul. Thud, the sound of something hitting the floor was heard, and of course, because of a sudden sound, everyone directed their attention towards it. And what did everyone in the room see? Well, they saw a shocked Kakashi as he stared towards the orb with his book now out of his hand and laying down gently on the floor. It was safe to say, there was also a cigarette on the floor, along with a multitude of items, including a dango stick and some other basic things the Jonin held in their hands throughout the meeting. Although, the weirdest item found was a stretchy green skin-tight suit. However, through all of this, there seemed to be one person in the room who was more amused if anything about the identity of the teen as they stood there out in the open. Well, I guess I could see if the kid wants to be my apprentice in the medical field. Grinned out a laughing Tsunade as she stared at the orb where the kid was now waving a hand in front of Iruka's face in order for him to snap out of his stupor. Funny enough, the sound of giggles actually snapped everyone out of their own shock as Jiraiya was quickly writing down on his little notebook. The mysterious teen is then revealed to be their long-lost twin. Through this, there is heartbreak, tragedy, and emotional baggage that rides along the shoulders of the girls as they try become one with their own brother. Yes, this is it, giggled a happy Jiraiya as he finished writing in his small notepad. But, just as he did, he was met with a pissed-off Tsunade who now had a glowing blue fist. Seeing Tsunade's fist, the white-haired pervert blinked owlishly towards his comrade before letting out a small tear from the corner of his eyes. Mercy? Asked Jiraiya, only getting a larger glare from Tsunade. No, replied Tsunade as she slammed her fist against Jiraiya's head, which then propelled his body straight into the ground, leaving him indented into the floor. However, it was during this that someone realized something. Wait, where's Hokage-sama? Questioned a random Jonin, gaining a few looks of disbelief from everyone in the room as they finally noticed that the Hokage chair was empty. It didn't take long for a now relaxed Kakashi to simply point towards the ball on the table. Probably seeing this with his own eyes. with soon-to-be genins. Come on, it's not that shocking, right? I mean, I am a super cool guy and everything, even ask Satsuki-chan over there for evidence if you want. Spoke Naruto as he clicked his fingers in front of the teacher face multiple times, only for Iruka's face to stay the exact same. Shaking his head as he let out a small sigh, Naruto turned towards his former opponent, that being Kasumi, before letting out a single sweat drop at the sight of the girl seemingly sending out torrents of chakra as she attempted to dispel a genjutsu. And considering the fact that she originally thought he was a waste of space and all, it kinda made sense that the one person who whipped her was the one person she utterly thought was a waste. It would seem like the world was ending for their perspective. I think you broke them, Naru-kun, replied a voice sarcastically towards his left, drawing Naruto's attention as he stared at his friend for a few more moments before nodding. Probably. But at least this way Sasuke's fangirls are too shocked to irritate him, and yeah, that's really all the positives here, Satsuki, replied Naruto with a smile, gaining a small nod from Satsuki as she stood in front of him with a grin. Okay, it's official, Hokage-sama is a, muttered an irritated teen as he stared at the lone Konoha headband within his grasp with a narrow twitchy glare. Panning his eyes over towards his small desk beside his bed, the teen let out a small growl. Genin candidate Naruto Hayabusa, should he pass his Genin exam, which will be held with Team 7 the next day at 10 a.m., will be placed on the reserves due to not having enough squad members and teachers available to train him. He will be able to go on missions should said missions require a larger force of shinobis, while also not needing a more advanced unit. Signed, Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage. Glaring towards the letter, the blonde-haired teen let out a loud yell for a brief moment, before shaking his head and letting his shoulders slag as he stared down towards his crossed legs and blue blanket that laid underneath him. I guess I should have seen it coming after what I did, thought Naruto with a small chuckle as he remembered the shocked face of his father, or now rather the Hokage, as he pulled out a certain little piece of paper. Said paper was now sealed on his person due to the memories it would give him should he ever look at it. Shaking his head at the thought, the teen glanced up towards his ceiling, before letting out a large sigh while rubbing some of the sleep out from his right eye. But seriously, not only did he put me in the reserves, but he also made Satsuki-chan a 4th member of Team 7 led by Kakashi. Kakashi, the guy who reads porn everywhere. What's worse is because Satsuki's a pervert, she might even do it. Shouted Naruto as he fell backwards onto his bed and gave his ceiling a crimson-eyed stare. Oh well, I'm sure Makoto-chan would kill Kakashi before he could corrupt her, and since Sasuke's there, I doubt she would jump at the chance to read that smut out in the open. Speaking of which, I have to get going soon, muttered Naruto as he blankly continued to stare towards the ceiling. Lifting his right hand up towards his face, which was bare and open without his usual black glove on it, the teen couldn't help but simply stare silently at his own hand. I know that it looks the same as my own, but this is another body altogether. What could have happened to the Naruto of this body? Did the pressure of being a failure and a Jinchuriki push him over the edge? Questioned Naruto as he watched as he moved his hand around a bit before clenching it shut, ignoring the odd tingle as he felt a slight shock from his hand before shutting his eyes. Oh well, from what Kurama told me, the kid didn't deserve the life he had lived. No child should have a family ignore him and then have others not only ridicule him, but also curse his name for something out of his control. Naruto Namikaze, for wherever you are, I hope you are resting peacefully, thought Naruto silently with his eyes still closed as his mind and body seemed to relax for a few moments before the teen let out a small sigh. Before you knock on the door, I know you're there, grumbled out Naruto tiredly as he opened his tired crimson eyes, which he had decided to keep over his body's original blue eyes, before turning his head slightly towards the window where a blank-looking Kakashi sat crouched on the balcony of his apartment. Giving the teen an eye smile, the man gave a small wave. Yo, so, mind explaining to me why you aren't at the training field, Naruto? Asked Kakashi with his signature eye smile, of which still slightly gave Naruto the shivers as he actually had no feasible clue as to how he made his eye muscles do that, before giving the Jonin a small smirk. Any reason why you haven't been to the training ground yet either? Questioned Naruto, gaining a confused look from Kakashi for a moment, before he let out a small grin. Well, aren't you a smart cookie? How do you know? Asked Kakashi, causing Naruto to simply sit up and shrug his shoulders before pointing towards him. If I said that you still have a nightcap on your head, would you believe me? Asked Naruto, gaining a shake from Kakashi, causing the teen to let out a small chuckle before raising his hands up into a surrender-like fashion. Fine, fine, you're always 3 hours late to everything less it'd be a very important mission. As such, I made sure to scribble out the 7 on the note and replace it with a 10 to make sure I didn't forget that you would be 3 hours late. Replied Naruto as he stretched his back and neck slightly as the Jonin continued to sit in silence, before giving him a thumbs up. You, my young little friend, might be someone I could find interesting. Replied Kakashi as he propped himself down into a leaning position as he laid against the balcony's metal fence. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto stretched his arms for a few moments more, making sure to get all the kinks from his body quickly before standing up, showing his form being completely aside from a set of fox boxers, of which Kakashi gave him a raised eyebrow at. The Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, wearing fox boxers? Questioned Kakashi, getting another shrug from Naruto as he gave the man a half-assed stare. Suspicious man standing at a random balcony staring at a teen with only a set of boxers, spoke Naruto as he went over towards his small cupboard before pulling out a black form-fitting singlet along with a set of long black pants, which had a set of white bandages attached to the hips so they could easily be used and accessed. Getting the pants on first before pulling the duo bandages, the teen quickly wrapped up the ends of his pants, making sure to get his ankles and feet properly wrapped, before pulling a set of thin shinobi sandals out from under his bed, of which he then put on. Rolling his ankles around a bit, the teen gave out a small nod before slipping on the black singlet before grabbing onto what appeared to be a Magatama necklace, which had 6 crimson stones on it, something the teen had recently purchased the day before. Turning back towards Kakashi, who had taken the time of Naruto changing to pull out his porn and start reading, the teen gave the silver-haired man a contemplating look for a moment, before lifting his right hand and sending a small burst of chakra into it, causing the man to momentarily divert his attention towards his book in favor of the teen whose apartment he was chilling at. And when he did, he saw what appeared to be a set of onigiri held within a small container. Said small container was thrown towards him by the teen. Catching the container, Kakashi moved to question the teen, but was soon cut off by said teen raising a single hand up while rolling his crimson eyes. Take it. From what I can tell, your eyes have a small set of bags underneath them. So, I'm guessing you haven't actually eaten this morning since you probably got up somewhere between 8 to 9, which actually cuts in on the time you would actually use to read porn. And since I'm sure your porn is more precious to you than food, you haven't gotten anything to eat yet. Replied Naruto, waving Kakashi off as he summoned a single onigiri in his right hand before stuffing it into his mouth before quickly swallowing it. Walking towards the balcony where his dumbstruck instructor sat, the teen gave the man a wink. Sorry sensei, but I gotta dash. See ya there, spoke Naruto, giving the man a large smirk before hopping over the edge where he then fell onto the roof of another building, before quickly dashing off, jumping from roof to roof, leaving a slightly shocked Kakashi behind. Glancing down towards what appeared to be a small box with 6 different onigiri, the silver-haired man let out a small chuckle before popping the lid off and grabbing one of the rice balls before taking a bite out. Enjoying what apparently was a teriyaki rice ball, the man let out a tired sigh. All that from a glance. The kid's definitely interesting. Sensei should have calmed down by now, but still, why'd you do it, Naruto? Questioned Kakashi as he continued to eat his rice balls. Glancing into the rather simple bedroom of Naruto Hayabusa, as he was now called, the Jonin couldn't help but chuckle. Yes, you are interesting, laughed out Kakashi slightly before lifting his ICHA up to his face as he took another bite. "Oh Rumi-chan, you dirty girl. Going all over Ruto like that," giggled the man as he continued to eat, a smile plastered onto his face as he somehow continued to read. Training Ground 7. Two-san's still coming to terms with what happened yesterday, and Ka-chan has spent the last 10 hours simply staring blankly towards an apparent blank room that hadn't been lived in for the past 3 years, and the dobi, the baka, the waste of space, growled out a silent blonde-haired girl as she glared towards a single tree with a look of pure hate as her mind seemed to focus on one single thing. That single thing happened to be her brother, who distanced himself from her family. The Namikaze family. Continuing her glaring, the blonde-haired girl flared her chakra out slightly as she clenched her right fist tightly in anger as her eyes seemed to show a ghostly figure fighting against her in a jokish fashion, taunting her at any and every moment as she desperately attempted to fight against them. That baka, that waste of space, he destroyed me. A prodigy like my father. How did a dead last chakra-less bastard beat me? How does he have chakra now? How damn it? Screamed mentally Kasumi as she remembered herself surrendering towards the once mysterious hooded shinobi, only to watch in shock as the face of her worthless brother appeared in place of her mighty opponent, one of which she thought could possibly rival her and push her into becoming stronger. But the image of her worthless brother being the one to do it. It was impossible, it was an insult. Her brother, who didn't have any formal shinobi training from her family, along with any other shinobi apparently if what her father's reports said were true, who also went to a civilian school, which wasn't shown any form of fighting, it just wasn't possible at all. But he did say he was self-taught. Did her worthless brother really train himself to that degree? To the degree that she herself was unable to keep up? It couldn't be true, right? Shaking her head, Kasumi narrowed her blue eyes for a single moment before letting out a small sigh as she closed her eyes. "I'll get the answer today, let's see what you have, Dobi," thought Kasumi with a small bout of irritation within her mind as she pictured the white-hooded teen reveal himself to be Naruto, smirking in all his glory. However, besides the irritated Kasumi stood a now grinning Mito Namikaze, who was staring directly ahead of herself as she felt her blood pumping and flowing from head to toe as her mind replayed over a single image over and over. Said image was the revealing of the hidden white-hooded teen, who was exposed to being her brother, or rather ex-brother Naruto. "Oh Naruto-kun, my favorite pet, I can't wait for when I hold you down and have my way with you, it will be perfect. Holding the one who broke my heart yesterday, begging for me to pleasure them as I stand above their defeated form. I can't wait, Naruto-kun, I can't wait for you to become mine, and since we're legally not under the same family anymore," giggled a red-haired teen as she felt her cheeks flush in a slight shade of red as her hands moved up her body to wrap themselves around her waist for a moment before falling back down towards her sides, leaving the still smirking face of one Mito Namikaze as she continued to stare blankly out into the world as her mind went over towards her ex-brother Naruto. While this was happening, Satsuki and Sasuke couldn't help but send disturbed stares towards the two Namikaze sisters as they could simply feel what they were thinking, one of which made it a lot worse for the two as they didn't know how that was possible. Glancing over towards her left, Satsuki nudged her brother. "This isn't normal, right?" questioned Satsuki, gaining a nod from Sasuke in return. Seeing the nod, the girl looked away and crossed her arms under her bust. "Okay. Just checking," returned Satsuki as she fell silent as she stared up towards the clouded sky above with her eyes relaxing into a half-lidded stare. "Where are you, Naruto-kun?" questioned the girl as she stared silently upwards. "With Naruto. I'm telling you, if I was to simply make a house, it would be easier. Yes, I can already see the design. Simple, bleak and boring. Oh, so you don't want a room in the house I could create with my power? So what? How would creating a house from your energy do anything to strengthen your control? I dunno, I think houses are awesome and in some way it would work out. I've completely lost track about what we were talking about. You're not the only one, Kurama. Didn't I have something to do today? Questioned a bored Naruto as he walked out of a small dango shop with a single stick of dango sitting within his right forefinger and thumb. Casually walking away from the place, the teen couldn't help but narrow his brow for a second while tilting his head, causing a single object to sail past his head. Okay, what was I doing before? I think I was going somewhere before I needed the toilet. Then after a very satisfying release of bodily liquids, I decided to go to a weapons store in order to take a quick browse, before I was kicked out, after which I paint bombed the place, which brought me to being hungry, thus having the dango. Yep, still don't remember. Thought Naruto blankly as the past hour's events played through his mind as he continued to stretch his neck and body at random points, avoiding sharp knives from stabbing into his back and head as he continued to walk a seamlessly random direction. You fox bastard. Come to my shop again and I'll kill you. Screamed a voice behind Naruto, causing the teen to blank for a second, before clicking his fingers. Right. I was going to grab some female cloths for Yo Satsuki. Shouted Naruto happily as he walked towards a single store that was in the corner of his eye. What? Asked Kurama, causing Naruto to mentally blanch for a moment, before letting out a whistle as he glanced around nervously. I mean, I was going to look for cloths for Satsuki as an early birthday present. Replied Naruto quickly as he scratched the back of his head with a large grin plastered onto his face as he walked, completely ignoring the glaring people around him as they whispered about him. Continuing his walk towards the shop, the teen couldn't help but feel a small nagging feeling in the back of his head for a few moments, but alas, like all problems the teen had, he could simply brush them off till the last minute, where he then either disintegrated the irritation, or flat out ignores it. However, as he got within the reach of the store, Naruto couldn't help feel a shiver crawl up his spine as he felt his hand grasp the door's handle. Getting over his rather odd shiver, the teen opened the door. And when he did, he couldn't help but sweat drop as he stared directly into the eyes of a red-haired woman, who was giving him a blank shocked stare. Naruto? Questioned the woman, causing the teen to blink slowly before raising his right hand up slightly. Hey there Kushina-sama, nice day right? Questioned Naruto as he gave a slight wave of his hand as he let out a small awkward smile out to Kushina, of which nodded slightly, before widening her eyes, and gaining a dark look within her violet-colored eyes. Giving a small dark smile towards the blonde-haired teen in front of her, Kushina couldn't help but let out a dark smile, causing the teen to gulp as his body seemed to naturally react to a dangerous individual. Continuing with her smile and evil chuckle, the woman shut her eyes and tilted her head slightly. Why did you do it, Naruto? I mean, if you had just told us that we were pushing you away, spoken a solemn-sounding Kushina as her long red hair fluttered in the wind behind her as she watched her son, or rather ex-son Naruto, walk slightly in front of her with his hands shoved in his pockets as he felt the sun bear down on him from above as he glanced back towards his mother. Kushina-sama, we both know that it's only now after I left that you realized that I was being pushed away. If you were to honestly back in that same position years ago with me not gone and separated from you and Hokage-sama, would you truly believe that my words were true? And not just an attempt to guilt-trip the two of you? Because from what I believe, I know you wouldn't have believed me back then. No matter how much times I would say it. Replied Naruto as he roamed his eyes around the area, watching as people turned their heads away from him and Kushina as they walked towards the front of the village in order to get to the training ground where his exam with Kakashi and Team 7 was being held within the next hour if he had to say anything. Silence was the response Naruto earned from the woman as she lowered her head down in shame, unwilling to speak the harsh truth Naruto had laid out for her bluntly just moments ago. And as the silence prolonged itself, so too did the awkwardness of the situation between the ex-mother and son duo. Eventually, the teen couldn't help but want to end the silence, not wanting to have such an atmosphere around him any longer. Just so you know, Kushina-sama, you still are my mother, and Hokage-sama is still my father, no matter how you look at it. All this legal document of mine is basically just gives me my own identity to form out into the shinobi world outside of the village. Something that would have been near impossible, as I would be constantly compared to Hokage-sama for every feat I achieved. Either way, I'm still your son Kushina-sama. You don't have to be so tense around me. What was done was due to my own decision. I hope you can accept that, murmured Naruto as he turned himself around, his eyes coming into contact with Kushina's downtrodden ones for a brief moment before the woman quickly removed her own eyes from Naruto's gaze. Even still, murmured a disheartened Kushina as she continued to stare towards the floor in silence for a few seconds as her mind replayed over what Naruto had just said. But before any conclusive thought could appear, the blonde-haired teen decided to at least make the situation between himself and Kushina somewhat doable. Scratching the back of his head as he did so, the teen gave the woman a small smile. Okay then, how about you come watch the Genin exam Team 7 and I have to take now and just see how far my efforts have gotten me. That way, you can see why I think this is the right choice for me. How about it, Kushina-sama? Asked Naruto as he watched his former mother, to this version of Naruto's body at least, seemingly lost in thought for a few moments before finally coming to an agreement with a nod of her head before she relaxed her form slightly. Okay Naruto-kun, but I want to make this into a bet, replied the woman, drawing a curious stare from Naruto as his blue eyes focused on his mother's own set for a second before nodding. Very well, what are your conditions, Kushina-sama? Returned Naruto as he continued to walk in a relaxed and leisured pace, Kushina following behind him not even a few steps behind. If you don't pass your examination, and prove to me that you will be fine on your own, you have to come back home with me, Minato, Kasumi and Mito. Also, you have to drop Sama from the end of my name, just call me Ka-chan, like you used to. Muttered Kushina in a soft tone as her eyes shone with determination as she watched Naruto stop dead in his tracks and look towards her before letting out a tired sigh as his blue eyes narrowed themselves slightly for a moment before returning to their regular size. Fine, but if I win, you cannot ask me to return to the Namikaze household, and you will give up on me returning to the family of yours. Along that, should I win, I will only call you Kushina-san, and to finish off, I cannot be questioned as to how I attained my abilities, and if they are created from some way, the abilities I have are my own, and will remain my own. Do we have a deal, Kushina-sama? Questioned Naruto as he and Kushina locked eyes for what felt like hours before the woman narrowed her brow before nodding. Very well, Sochi, returned Kushina with a smile, full bent on having Naruto return home where he belonged, where she could now fix her mistake, her very costly mistake that she was stupid enough to let happen. Hearing that, the blonde-haired teen let out a wide smile before placing a hand on Kushina's arm, and with a small wink, the two disappeared in a burst of wind. Hokage Tower. You heard the deal, Kakashi. I don't care how hard you fight, but make sure Naruto comes home. It should be pretty easy for someone of your caliber, okay? Just bring him back to us, muttered Minato as he sat there with a crystal orb in front of him, his student watching the man fall silent before giving an eye smile. I'll try my best, sensei, replied the man with a puff of smoke, leaving behind an irritated Minato as he watched his student leave some leaves from his shunshin for no reason. Damn it, Kakashi, grumbled Minato as his eyes moved towards the all-seeing orb once again. Training Ground 7, and in a marvelous entrance, Naruto Hayabusa, shouted Naruto happily as he and Kushina appeared in a vortex of wind, sending leaves flying and scattering around them as his technique calmed itself down. It was also not a few moments after the leaves all calmed down did Naruto get a clean punch to the face courteously of an irritated Satsuki who could now be seen with berries leaves of all sizes and shades of green wedged between each strand of hair on her head, Sasuke having something similar with leaves covering one of his eyes and jutting out from his mouth. Mito and Kasumi, however, their forms were simply covered from head to toe in leaves, showing how intentional the appearance of the blonde-haired teen was set out. Of course, Kushina being with Naruto as he used his technique, was oblivious to this as she simply watched her son getting beaten the crap out of by his friend Satsuki while Sasuke watched on with a silent evil grin on his face. Ka-chan! Screamed a voice as it plowed its way out of the leaves covering their form, revealing a disgruntled Mito as she and her long red hair poked itself out from the leaf storm surrounding both her and Kasumi, who had managed to escape not moments after. Giving a caring smile towards the two girls, Kushina walked up to them before opening her arms wide, inviting the two girls to give her a hug, of which they happily accepted while also ignoring the sounds of Naruto getting the shit kicked out of him by Satsuki, who was now enhancing her body with her chakra. Smiling down towards her two girls, Kushina let out a small giggle as she slowly picked out a few leaves from their hair. So you two ready for your genin test? Did you make sure you got all your equipment on hand? Asked Kushina, watching as her two daughters nodded their heads. Yes, Ka-chan. I made sure Mito didn't leave any of her scrolls behind so she should be stacked up. Replied Kasumi proudly as she gave her mother a beaming smile, gaining one back from Kushina as she rubbed the blonde-haired girl's head for a moment before turning her attention towards the pouting Mito. Did you make sure your stubborn sister eat her breakfast, Mito-chan? You know how she simply loves to follow the rules unlike us troublemakers. Asked Kushina with a grin as she and her mini-me gained a wide smile before looking towards Kasumi, who let out a small huff of annoyance before letting out a sigh. Sensei said not to eat. So I didn't. If you can't trust your superiors in their decisions, then you can't trust anyone aside from yourself and your direct family. So, until proven otherwise, I will follow my orders no matter what you try to tell me. Replied Kasumi, getting a bored look from both Mito and Kushina for a moment before the mother of three let the two out from the group hug before turning her attention back towards Naruto, who was now sitting on the floor with a small lump on his forehead while listening to Satsuki tell Naruto about the fundamentals about how her hair takes a long time to do. And when she saw that, Kushina couldn't help but feel a sincere feeling enter her chest as she watched her son, something that she realized she hadn't done in a long time, always being occupied with something else at the time, something she would deem more important than Naruto almost constantly. Did I really miss out on my son growing up like this? Just look at him. I never realized he was like this at all. How could I have decided anything was basically more important than my own son? Questioned Kushina quietly as she watched Naruto beg for forgiveness from Satsuki while ignoring the irritated Sasuke as he began to shake the rest of the leaves out from his shinobi sandals, giving Naruto a stink eye throughout the long and drawn-out process. Poof. Yo. Now doesn't everyone here seem lively today? Asked Kakashi as he appeared in a puff of smoke, revealing himself already reading his Ika Ika book before arriving. However, it was because of him reading his book that he didn't notice Kushina let out a dark chuckle as she walked towards him with a smile. Kakashi-kun, what's that I can see? You wouldn't like to lose your hand now, would you? Asked Kushina in a fake overly pleasant tone as she stalked towards Kakashi, who instantly snapped his book shut before hiding it within his pouch with a nervous smile on his face. Now, let's not be hasty, Kushina-sama, responded Kakashi with his signature eye smile before moving his attention over towards the group of genin before opening his eyes, showing a bored look before clapping his hands. Okay, so, before we do anything, I would like to announce that the four of you have already technically passed my test, which is to be able to work with each other, something the Hokage has decided you have done within the academy, bar Satsuki-chan and Naruto-kun there. However, considering Satsuki is a sister to Sasuke, that gives the belief that she has the capabilities to work with her team. And with her apparent skills shown during the test, she is able to pass with her three teammates. As for Naruto, he will be having a practical session against me. During this, should he display enough skill, he will be placed in the genin reserves, so with that out of the way, my cute little genin and Kushina-sama, if you would like to watch Naruto's test, please go towards the outer ring of the training field. Spoke Kakashi with his bored tone dragging along everyone's ears, before pointing towards a section of the training field where he was sure his fight with Naruto wouldn't take place. Nodding, Kushina and the 4 other genin moved over towards the section of the training ground, Satsuki giving Naruto a small grin as she walked by and Sasuke giving him a supporting HN as he shoved Naruto in the shoulder, earning a small chuckle from the now red-eyed teen. Ignoring the little interaction between the 2 male teens, Kakashi slowly reached into his kunai pouch once again, before pulling out his orange-colored book with a small grin on his face before glancing up towards Naruto, who was giving him a small twitching expression, before lowering his eyes back down towards his now open book. Now, if you would like Naruto-san, you may begin, spoke Kakashi with his bored tone staying the same throughout his entire appearance within the training field. Twitching slightly as he was basically ignored in favor of a book, the blonde-haired teen let out a small animalistic grin before holding his hands into a lone hand sign. Well then Kakashi-senpai, I think I will, shouted Naruto with a grin as he suddenly brought forth a massive surge of white chakra through his body, before directing it all into his hand sign, of which Kakashi hadn't paid attention to before the sudden surge of powerful energy. And when he did, he blinked in shock before lowering his book slightly so while it was out of his way, he could still read it if he had the chance. Isn't that the hand sign for Kage Bunshin no Jutsu? Screamed Naruto with his grin widening itself as not a moment later did the entire training ground suddenly envelop itself in a thick clump of smoke, obscuring both Kakashi's and the audience's vision from what was happening, before hundreds upon hundreds of blonde-haired, crimson-eyed teens were seen standing in a perfect circle around Kakashi, their smirks wide as their leaders was before they all simultaneously stretched their necks. So, Kakashi-san, wanna continue? Taunted the clones out loud, leaving Kakashi, who was now slightly sweating at the base of his neck, to let out a small chuckle as his hand lowered his book back towards his pouch while waving off the clones with his other hands. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, chided Kakashi with an eye smile, while internally sweating bullets as he could now obviously feel out the sheer amount of chakra each clone had within their systems. How does Naruto have such large reserves? This is simply impossible. From what I count, it's over 500 clones, all around me in each and every direction. The amount of chakra they have within their bodies is somewhere between a low inexperienced Jonin, and that of a decent Jonin. That would put the kid's reserves well over a Kage's. Shouted Kakashi internally as he had his lone right eye move itself around before shutting itself beneath his eyelid. Well, I guess I'll have to put some effort into this one after all, grumbled Kakashi internally before he suddenly drew in a small breath, before disappearing in the wind. Not long after did this happen, the sounds of clones popping alerted the remaining clones that Kakashi began his attack. With Satsuki and company. Show off. Just because he has super strong chakra and stupidly good control over it doesn't mean he has to flaunt it off. Oh, who am I kidding? That's all he does when he trains with me and Sasuke, that egotistical lovable asshole, growled out Satsuki as she watched the field occupying hundreds of Naruto clones, before the sounds of popping was heard not minutes later, alongside the shouts of victory from the clones as they charged towards Kakashi, who was now flipping himself all around the area while making sure to take out each and every clone he could. Dobi would waste that kind of chakra for a simple demonstration. Grunted Sasuke as he watched alongside his sister Naruto's clones seemingly locked in combat with their sensei, who was gaining the upper hand with each of the clones he had defeated, before turning around towards his sister. Satsuki, how strong is Naruto really? I can get a small gist from him training us, but there's just too many things unknown about the Dobi to make a good guess. Asked Sasuke as he watched Satsuki give him a small Sharingan-enhanced stare, before shrugging her shoulders before moving her eyes over towards the fight. Honestly, I have no clue Ni-san, but all I know is that Naruto will always beat his opponent and protect those he cares about, and that makes him awesome, replied Satsuki with a blush spread across her cheeks as she imagined Naruto holding onto her like he had done when they were kids. Blanching slightly at the thought of his sister with Naruto in a more familiar situation, the teen shook his head before letting out a small sigh. I guess, the Dobi is holding out on us in training. grumbled Sasuke with a grin stretched along his face, only for Satsuki to slap him on his shoulder in a half-hearted nature before returning to the scene of Kakashi seemingly destroying all the Naruto clones that were all hurling themselves towards the Jonin. While the two Uchiha were happily enjoying watching the fight and chatting amongst themselves, the other three occupants had something else on their minds. I impossible. How did he do that? Both I and Mito-chan can't even create that many Kage Bunshin. And we're the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi, something that gives us the ability to have more chakra than anything or anyone else. Add both our Uzumaki chakra, and 2 Sans chakra, how does Naruto, who isn't even supposed to have chakra in the first place, have enough to dwarf both my and Mito's chakra amounts? Asked Kasumi with a dumbstruck visage on her face as her blue eyes watched Kakashi nearing the end of the clone onslaught before glancing over towards her sister, of whom was frozen in utter shock. The same however could be said about their mother Kushina, who was speechless from what she was witnessing. Narrowing her eyes, the blue-eyed girl glanced down towards her hands before clenching them angrily. So what if he has massive reserves of chakra? I probably have higher amounts of control over it, and I know plenty of jutsu, including the Rasengan. San even said that both me and Mito would probably get to sign the Toad summoning contract soon, and even begin our training in our elemental affinities to a higher degree. Naruto has nothing on us, thought Kasumi with a small relaxed sigh escaping her lips as she calmed herself down before returning her focus onto the battle ahead. She was stronger than Naruto, she knew it, and she also knew Mito was just under her as well. Meaning Naruto was far behind the two of them. And this fight against Kakashi would prove it. Hokage office. The amount of chakra that would take. I know the reports of him being unable to utilize chakra was true. I had Tsunade do it, but, is it possible that we were somehow wrong? The results being due to a foreign element. Kami, 500 shadow clones all able to fight without as much as a hint of fatigue. Naruto, thought Minato out solemnly as he stared at the all-viewing orb on his desk with a concentrated gaze. Gotta give that kid some respect, he's what? 13 and is able to do something Kasumi-chan and Mito-chan can't do. I can only think of one person being able to do what he did, and that was Kushina using Kyuubi's chakra before the beast escaped from her seal. Spoke a voice besides Minato, whom of which simply nodded his head. Yeah, Kushina-chan was probably only able to do that because of the Kyuubi and her special chakra, of which both Mito and Kasumi have as well, but she was in her 20s alongside that. But, to be fair, her control was lower than our daughters are, so they should be able to produce more clones than she did, but yet, here is Naruto, doing something my wife could without everything supporting her in achieving the same amount of clones he produced, murmured Minato as he continued to stare into the orb in front of him, his sensei giving a small nod of acknowledgement before letting out a small chuckle. He's really surprising if anything, and with that, Kakashi has defeated all the clones. Took him a bit longer than I thought it would have considering the brats just graduated, without any of the formal training at the academy, but even then, he did pass without it. So the kid must be hiding his strength from prying eyes. Returned Jiraiya, getting a small sigh from Minato as he watched Kakashi finish off all the clones before freezing in place. Narrowing his eyes, Minato raised his left hand up to his chin, his eyes seemingly trying to identify why his student had frozen in place, before he suddenly widened his eyes, turning towards his sensei who had a similar expression written upon his face. Fuinjutsu, the two muttered simultaneously before looking back into the orb with further interest. Training Ground 7. What? I can't move. When or how did he tag me? Asked Kakashi within his mind as he tried to furiously move any single muscle in his body, including his eyes as they sat there frozen shut with the darkness enveloping his senses. What's the matter, Kakashi? Having a bit of trouble there? Questioned a voice all around the silver-haired man as his mind tried to identify the specific location of the voice. He failed however, and not long after did he suddenly feel himself flopping dead onto the floor, his body still not responsive to his commands. Don't worry Kakashi, I'll take the seal off in a second, it wouldn't be fair to beat you like this, but really, you have to take this a little more serious than you have if you want a chance to fight against me fairly. Replied Naruto's voice, once again being heard from every angle and position within the darkness that basked Kakashi. And with that, the silver-haired man suddenly shot up onto his feet, his body feeling heavy and drowsy after having been awoken and placed back into movement once again. Glaring with his one lone eye, Kakashi spread his senses out into the open, his mind replaying over everything he learned about the teen, and when he did, his hand immediately shot up towards his headband, before being yanked up, displaying the crimson three-tomoed eye of the Sharingan. Oh, the Sharingan. Let's see how well you do now, Kakashi, shouted Naruto from behind the silver-haired Jonin, of which turned around and came face to face with Naruto's fist. Easily throwing his own hand up against the teen, Kakashi quickly got hold of Naruto's fist before twisting himself, throwing Naruto's body over his shoulder, only for the teen to grasp against Kakashi's wrist that had caught his own hand. Before sending out a surge of lightning chakra, electrocuting the man as he screamed before getting his feet swept from underneath him, where he then felt a foot smash into his gut. Or would have hadn't he substituted with a long not all that far from him. This was going to be tough, especially if he lost against the kid. His reputation would sure as hell get a hit after this. Kakashi, you're kinda boring me out, honestly. No jutsu. No ultimate secret finishing move. I know you're holding back so you can test me, but if you really had to resort to the Sharingan you got, then you should actually attempt to fight properly. Spoke Naruto as his eyes followed Kakashi's movement up within the trees before falling back onto the ground, standing a few meters away from Naruto with a small smile riding up across his face. Now, I do see that you have a point there, but who knows? I could have pulled out my Sharingan to scare the cute little genin I'm fighting against. Replied Kakashi, his eyes shifting into a set of eye smiles as he spoke. His response, a very disturbed Naruto who lifted a single hand sign up towards his chest. Yeah, no, that's too disturbing for me, so I'm just going to do this, fire style, great fire annihilation. Shouted Naruto as his chest expanded for a moment before the teen spewed forth a massive wave of flames, something that had the audience agape as their jaws dropped. Kakashi was among them as he quickly ran through a set of hand signs. Water style. Water wall. Responded Kakashi as a torrent of water shot out from his mouth before forming a solid wall of water in front of him, of which soon met the flames head-on in a clash for supremacy, and not moments after did the water wall he create falter, the flames destroying the water jutsu at an extraordinary rate. Gritting his teeth behind the mask, the Jonin quickly ran through another set of hand signs before suddenly sinking into the earth, dodging the flame Naruto spewed forth. However, when he did so, Naruto let out a wide grin before jumping into the air, where he then went through another hand sign. Fire style. Earth Scorcher. Shouted the teen with a wide grin as he held his hands together in front of his chest, where he began to infuse fire chakra between his palms. Few seconds later, the teen held a small ball of flames, no bigger than a marble before flinging it towards the area Kakashi was hiding under the earth. And when the small ball made contact, it exploded, sending condensed flames all around the area it had hit, burning everything, including the ground below it. And like that, the sight of Kakashi's body exploding from the earth appeared, his form heavily sweating from the heat he was under before he darted through the earth's surface before landing out of the hot zone. Landing into a crouch, the teen grinned while placing his palm onto the floor. Earth style. Mud Dragon. Grinned out Naruto, sending forth two twin dragons out from the ground as their dark brown colored bodies charged towards Kakashi, who was known charging towards them before using their bodies as a way to move towards Naruto, of which stood himself up before clapping his hands together, his crimson eyes still locked onto Kakashi's form as it dodged and weaved the two mud dragons that broke into pieces once they smashed into the ground and disappeared. Had enough, Kakashi. Because I'm just getting started. Wind style. Gale Palm. Roared Naruto as a torrent of wind rippled through the area, sending the midair Kakashi back before raising his fingers to his mouth. You're really unpredictable, you know. Fire style. Dragon flame bomb. Shouted Kakashi through the harsh winds, sending a flaming dragon soaring towards Naruto, tearing through the wind he had created before growing in size. Naruto could only blink before rushing through two hand signs before slapping his hands together once again. Water style. Water dragon. Returned Naruto as he sent chakra into the hand signs, which resulted in the fully formed water dragon that appeared from thin air, of which wrapped itself around Naruto's form, taking the damage from Kakashi's attack, leaving a mist surrounding the teen. Seeing this, Kakashi narrowed his Sharingan eye as he began to focus on his environment, before suddenly sending a spinning backhand to the air behind him, where the image of Naruto's now crouching form greeted him with a grin, before disappearing in a flash. Blinding the man and his Sharingan for a moment before feeling the first of the young teen drill into his gut, sending him into a hunched position before an elbow made contact against his nose, sending him back against the ground in a skid, before quickly catching Naruto's follow-up charge, only to feel the Naruto in his grasp disappear in a puff of smoke. Rubbing his eyes quickly, the man only had a moment to witness the image of the world before suddenly being enveloped in an eternal darkness that spanned all around him once again. Don't worry, Kakashi, this time it's only a genjutsu, spoke Naruto's eerily distorted tone, of which Kakashi identified before blocking a strike to his head, before sending his own strike into thin air, or what he thought was thin air before the sound of another puff told him what was happening. This control, this amount, this skill, this isn't possible. He used jutsu well over B rank over and over, with no break, and is able to utilize genjutsu, fuinjutsu and taijutsu efficiently to a point I'm struggling. I have to end this soon, I'm going to run out of chakra if I keep it going like this, thought the man as he sent an electrical burst out of his body, causing Naruto, who was in close proximity, to release the genjutsu before jumping back, giving the two some distance with Kakashi's Sharingan eye staring into Naruto's own eye. Got you, no. Sharingan. Genjutsu. Thought Kakashi with an internal smirk, before widening his eye as a large surge of pain struck his Sharingan eye. Grasping his eye with his left hand, Kakashi returned his sight on Naruto's form, of which hadn't moved the slightest. Aside from the widening grin the teen had. Kakashi-san, let's finish this off with a final jutsu clash, shouted Naruto's voice, reaching Kakashi's ears as he lowered his left hand back besides his body where he began to pump chakra throughout his body before giving the teen a nod. Very well, however, I hope for your case you surrender right now, Naruto, replied Kakashi in a serious tone, before he blitzed through a set of hand signs once again, before clutching his right wrist, where the sight of a sparking and enveloped hand greeted Naruto, of whom simply widened his smirk even wider. As for everyone else, they were all gaping, their eyes widening and their hearts thumping as they saw the jutsu in Kakashi's hand. But, before anyone could call out for Kakashi to stop his jutsu, the man charged, his hand sparking all over the place as he charged towards Naruto, who followed his example, running towards Kakashi with a wide smile. And as they charged, Kakashi was sweating, his eyes were dropping from exhaustion, and yet, across from him, Naruto continued to charge, his form seemingly perfect aside from slight cuts on his clothes. And as the two neared each other, Naruto lifted his hand up besides his head, before sending chakra into it. And like that, his jutsu formed. Drawing another silent gasp from those watching, including Kakashi, before it changed once more, the orb, which was a brilliant shade of pure white, already differing from the usual blue coloring, suddenly gained small amounts of wind around it, before slowly, ever so slowly, it was encased within a shuriken-like shape of wind. And as the two neared each other, this hearts being audible to their own ears, the two clashed. You do know why you are in here, don't you, Naruto? Questioned a tense Minato Namikaze as he watched his son sit across from him in his office with his now crimson eyes, something Naruto himself could apparently change whenever, as he mentioned a few moments ago, stared towards him with a bored gaze. Geez, I dunno. Maybe because I was caught putting itching powder in all the Anbu units' pants, remarked Naruto in an obviously fake happy tone, resulting in the Hokage of Konoha giving him a dead stare. You not only managed to utilize many high-ranking techniques, which should have been impossible without chakra as we had been told you had not had, some of said techniques aren't even documented in the Hokage archives, such as your use of a certain fire jutsu that I know we don't have, aka the jutsu the legendary Madara Uchiha used for a majority of his life, and then, when I thought you couldn't top that. It seems you have done something that not even I have come close to doing, perfecting the Rasengan by adding an elemental affinity to it. So tell me, how in the world had you done that? Questioned Minato in a serious tone, watching as Naruto gained a small twitch in his eye as he placed his elbow onto the oak Hokage desk before propping his chin up on his open palm. I guess I should have thought of also making it that Hokage-sama could also not question my abilities rather than just Kushina-sama, san, grumbled out Naruto as he realized his mental lapse in judgment, before giving his father a small smile. I guess it's fair, I screwed up so I might as well comply, since you are the Hokage and all. Groaned out Naruto as he pushed himself back up into his seat before rolling his shoulders against the wooden chair before staring at his father with his crimson eyes boring into his father's own cerulean blue ones. Clapping his hands together, the teen let out a small breath. The doctors were right. I did not have access to my chakra. Rather than not having any in the first place, my chakra seemed stuck in my body. It couldn't move and or flow, it was just still and unmoving in my coils. Because of that, the chakra I had held didn't register as anything other than me having enough chakra to keep myself alive, and that was it. Replied Naruto for a moment, watching as the Hokage seemed immersed in his story before rolling his eyes a bit. It was safe to say that I was pissed off when I found out I had chakra. And before you ask, I found out when I went into my mindscape. Finished off Naruto, putting his hand up to block his father from speaking. As you can guess, I met Kyuubi, sorry Kurama, gotta make him comfortable first by calling you that. Thought Naruto midway through his speech, gaining a small huff from his mind before coughing into his hand. Anyway, so I met the fur ball in all his mighty glory behind a massive cage, which I then may have annoyed him for a couple of minutes, before going off to explore the rest of my mindscape. During my time there, I had done a few certain things, which had affected my chakra in a positive way. Basically, my chakra is in its own league. It has all the benefits of being a more potent form of chakra, while also being more fluid and control-able in its form, allowing me to utilize high-level techniques with little to no waste of my chakra. Spoke Naruto, briefly lifting his left hand up from the table, showing his hand coated in a white flame-like energy, before lowering it back down towards the table. Nodding his head, Minato then decided to interrupt Naruto's story. I see, was there any form of side effects and what process you used to gain this more potent and control-able chakra? Questioned Minato, getting a small smile from Naruto as he shook his head. No disadvantages, aside from now being invisible to chakra sensors, since my chakra is different from everyone else. And as for getting my chakra in the way it is, chatted Naruto happily for a few moments, before narrowing his crimson eyes in a dark way. I'm never revealing how I had gained my new form of chakra. It is way too powerful for someone else to gain access to. And I will prevent that from ever happening. So in no way or form will anyone get that information from me. Is that clear, Hokage-sama? Replied Naruto in a dark and serious tone, getting a small glare from the Hokage before he hung his head a bit before letting out a small sigh. Very well. Truth be told, I hadn't exactly thought of the outcome of someone of Orochimaru's caliber gaining access to chakra that made you on par with Kakashi at such a young age. Murmured Minato for a moment before lifting his head up once more. Continue with your story then. Finished off the Hokage before falling silent once more, giving Naruto the lead. Nodding, the teen continued. Now that I had access to chakra, it allowed me to train, which should be obvious. However, it wasn't till the next day, just after I had fallen asleep, that I realized the potential I had before me as I awoke in my mindscape once again. Time obviously flows slower inside of a mindscape. For mine, it's 1 hour equals to that of a full 24-hour day. Using this, whenever I fell asleep in and appeared in my mindscape, I would then go over any form of knowledge I had, while also using my time in my mindscape to train in muscle memory, chakra control, technique creation, and everything in between. And considering the mind remembers everything you read, similar to the way the Sharingan does, once I had read a book, I was able to reread the book word for word, allowing me to enhance myself further. Rambled on Naruto before crossing his arms across his chest. Shutting his eyes, the teen let out a small yawn. So, while I trained for over 10/14 of an hour a day, with the remaining 2-4 hours to rest and do whatever I desired at that point in time, I would practice what I learned in the real world while also strengthening my body using seals that I had learnt from my mindscape. And as I went to sleep, I always had 8 hours to train, so I had, in total, 8 additional days in my mindscape per night, to train in theory. Groaned out Naruto as he watched the Hokage nod along to his story, making sure to memorize everything that Naruto spoke of. Of course, Naruto didn't say that he basically knew that you couldn't reach your own mindscape without being a Biju container and or Yamanaka, who of which couldn't sustain their own mindscape longer than a single minute. But, he also didn't mention that hadn't it been his yin-yang energy pools, he couldn't have originally reached and sustained his mindscape in his own reality. Shrugging, Naruto decided to finish off his story. Flash forwards a few months, and eventually the old fox decided that he was getting annoyed watching me train in silence and started to talk to me. Of course, it was originally a whole lot of, "I'll eat you, pathetic meat bag," and, "I will slaughter your village weakling," before me and the fox eventually started to have actual conversations and all. Eventually, we formed a friendly connection and the fox decided that he wouldn't mind helping me out by sharing his memories of techniques he had seen, such as Madara's infamous jutsu. And yeah, that's my story. Finished off Naruto with a small smile as he could simply see the small twitch Kurama had within his mindscape before diverting his attention to Minato, who shut his eyes for a moment. From what I understand, you have been training since you were 8, utilizing your new mindscape abilities and chakra till your current age, which gives me the impression that, due to your time in your mindscape, you are mentally older than most kids your age, or even above your age. Returned Minato, getting a small nod from Naruto, who gave him a wide grin. That you are correct, young man, replied Naruto in an over-exaggerated old man-like tone, getting a small twitch from Minato before shaking his head. However, while being mentally older, I guess this only revolves around you being older and wiser in shinobi skills, like tactics and formations. Meaning you are still at your own age, only with wisdom and power behind yourself. I must say, I'm very proud of you, Naruto. Smiled out Minato as he watched Naruto himself return the smile with one of his own, alongside a tiny nod. Thank you for the compliment, Hokage-sama, but now, regarding the question I know you are wanting to ask, no. I will not teach you how to add an elemental affinity to the Rasengan. It had taken me years within my mindscape to formulate the formula to safely create the technique, which I had shown in its lowest level. However, if you would like, I can demonstrate the stronger variant of the futon Rasengan in favor of gaining the notes of the second Hokage regarding his Hiraishin technique. Spoke Naruto, getting a curious stare from Minato. Oh, and why would I give something akin the likes of Tobirama-sama's Hiraishin notes to simply view a stronger Rasengan? Asked Minato innocently, gaining a blank look from Naruto as he let out a cheeky grin. Please, this is an opportunity for you to see the complete form of the Rasengan, well, at least one of its variants, which would allow you some insight on how to complete the technique. And I'm not asking for the Hiraishin technique itself, just the notes so that I could study them and possibly try my hand at creating my own Hiraishin seal later on. Replied Naruto, getting a small nod from Minato as he stood himself up before extending his hand towards his son, of which had copied his movement and soon grasped his father's hand in an agreement. Smiling, Naruto nodded to himself before turning his head towards the corner of the room. Jiraiya-san, you can come as well if you want in return for teaching me the Earth Jutsu swamp of the underworld. I can even give you notes of my fire-style Earth Scorcher. Spoke Naruto out loud, getting a small smile as he watched the white-haired pervert appear from the corner with a small glint within his eye. Very well then, I have to admit that fire jutsu was quite the technique. So I think I would be a fair trade. Replied Jiraiya with a thumbs up, getting a mental smile from Naruto, whose eyes softened slightly at the man who had taken him under his wing in a few missions back in his reality. Nodding to himself once more, Naruto returned his gaze towards the door that allowed someone into the Hokage office. Kushina-san, Kasumi-san and Mito-san, you can also come along, and yeah, don't breathe too loud when you hear something all that shocking. Gives your position away, ya know. Remarked Naruto with a shit-eating grin as he watched the door slowly open with Kushina walking through with a small embarrassed smile on her face, along with his two sisters, of who had different reactions to his story. One, Mito, was having a smile on her face with her eyes being slightly shut as she stared at Naruto's form with some ideas playing through her head, while Kasumi, well, she strode up towards Naruto before standing no more than a single inch away from him with a glare before reaching up and grasping the front of his attire. The room fell silent for a few moments as Naruto gazed down into his sister's eyes, before gaining a grin as he watched her open her mouth. I will surpass you. From now on, you are my goal until I reach a strength that even you yourself cannot attain. Mark my words, Naruto. I will beat you, no matter how hard I have to train. Understand that? Questioned Kasumi, causing a similar glint that Jiraiya had in his eyes to appear within Naruto's as he softly patted the blonde girl's head in a mocking gesture before winking. Sure. Good luck with that, Kasumi-san. I can't wait to see the day that happens. Replied Naruto as he moved his eyes over towards Minato once more, who had fallen silent as he watched the interaction between Naruto and Kasumi with a small hidden smirk. Kushina, however, had a fire within her eyes as she started to let out a small giggle as she threw her fist up. Yosh! Kasumi-chan, Mito-chan, I'm going to train you along with your father so that you can surpass your brother. Watch out, Naru-chan, your sisters are going to blow you out of the water in no time flat. Shouted Kushina in a happy and excited tone as she watched Naruto smirk at her while giving a small nod towards her. We'll see, Kushina-san, remarked Naruto briefly before rolled his neck briefly. Well, for this demonstration I suppose training ground 7 would work. But I would rather destroy Hokage-sama's personal training ground with my technique, so, see you all there. Shouted Naruto happily as he disappeared in a burst of wind, causing Kasumi's hair to flutter a bit before both she and Mito latched onto their parents. Minato, giving Kushina and Jiraiya a nod, also disappeared in a burst of smoke, which had caused the paperwork that had neatly been stacked to flutter onto the ground forgotten. Hokage personal training grounds, just above the Hokage monument. With a puff of smoke, the 3 adults and 2 teens soon appeared in the training ground with looks of either pure excitement, Kushina, or looks of eagerness as they bore witness to Naruto standing a few feet away from them with his arms crossed. Detaching his arms and giving a small wave, the teen rolled his shoulders slightly before looking towards the opposite side of the lush green training ground before returning his eyes over towards his audience. Okay, so the technique I'm going to show you is something that I had created, I think, 4 years ago after having my elemental affinities, yes, affinities plural, training to a very high level. Something that I doubt many could attempt without the use of shadow clones and hours of training. This jutsu is called Wind Style Rasenshuriken and is the first ever S-ranked jutsu I had created, a few months after beginning my training. Replied Naruto with a shit-eating grin as he turned his attention towards the end of the training field before holding his palm out in front of him. Now watch and learn, spoke out Naruto, summoning a white-colored Rasengan within a single blink of the eye. Now the normal form of my Rasengan, now let's get on to creating its wind variant. Grinned out Naruto as he began to pump wind-natured chakra into the orb, before suddenly moving his hand up above his head as torrents of wind chakra entered the spiraling orb, causing it to shift slightly as its form suddenly changed. Minato, from where he was standing, along with just about everyone there, couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock as the massive spiraling shuriken above Naruto's head continued to grow in size before each of the wind blades surrounding the white chakra orb lengthened out to the size of an average human before stopping. The sheer chakra amount, and the control, thought Minato, mentally gaping at the raw power he could feel from just looking at the technique. However, before he could continue his thought, Naruto sent another grin towards them. Now normally, a jutsu of this caliber cannot be used aside from shoving the technique directly at the opponent, but with enough training and skill, murmured off Naruto towards the end as he started to his arm back for a second. The powerful jutsu you see, can be thrown, shouted the teen over the tormenting winds generated from his technique as he threw his arm forward, sending his Rasenshuriken forward towards the end of the training field, which then soon exploded in a combination of powerful and slicing winds in a spiraling formation. Minato and the others had in fact had to shield their eyes from the winds that had managed to even reach them at gale-like strengths, just implementing how powerful the technique was even from a distance. And within a couple of seconds, the technique slowly began to die down, leaving a perfectly round crater on the opposite end of the training field with the trees around the epicenter of the blast being snapped and torn out of place. Turning his head back towards Minato and the rest of the group, Naruto gave a small smirk as he once again crossed his arms. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the general Rasenshuriken. There are also many variants such as Massive Rasenshuriken, Tiny Rasenshuriken, Rasenshuriken Barrage etc., so, what do you think? I think it's a bit over the top, but what works, works. Laughed out Naruto rhetorically as he watched his father, mother and siblings drop their mouths in shock. Jiraiya, however, simply threw a scroll at him before giving him a thumbs up. Good job there, Gaki. Not even an official genin, and already you have what appears to be a multitude of S ranks underneath your belt. Shouted Jiraiya in a proud tone, getting a small wink in return from Naruto alongside a separate scroll which contained his fire jutsu. Thanks Jiraiya-san from the ego boost. I'm sure I'll not turn into an overconfident asshole with praises like that. Remarked Naruto as he shook his head before looking over towards his father. Hey Hokage-sama, Jiraiya did raise a good point, have I gained the title of genin? Asked Naruto in an obviously fake curious tone, getting a blank look from the man as he shook his head. Honestly, with what I've heard, I'm tempted to give you a Chunin rank straight off the bat. In fact, don't do that, Hokage-sama, after all, the Chunin exams aren't too far away, right? Don't you want to show off the strength of your genin? Questioned Naruto. An evil grin spread across his face as Minato understood what Naruto was implying, alongside just about everyone else there. Nodding his head, Minato let out a small sigh before bringing out a single scroll from his Chunin vest hidden beneath his Hokage Haori before throwing it towards Naruto. Genin Naruto Hayabusa, you are now officially the first genin team consisting of yourself. I will try find a sensei for you later on. As of now, I am permitting you to take D to C rank missions for experience. However, I will probably send someone out with you to monitor your progress. Is that okay? Questioned Minato, getting a nod from Naruto as he turned away from the group and gave an over-the-shoulder wave. That's fine, Hokage-sama, thank you for the opportunity. Now if you will excuse me, I have 2 new techniques to learn. Spoke out Naruto as he briefly turned his head back to give a large smile before disappearing in the wind, leaving behind a small group of shinobi. Jiraiya, looking over to Minato, gave out a small grin. Hey Minato, about a sensei for the young kid. How about me? I mean, sure, I can't be here all the time, but I can easily pop in every couple of weeks and monitor the brat. Maybe even take him out with me on missions. What do you say? Asked Jiraiya, getting a small smile from Minato as he let out a nod. That Doesn't sound too bad of an idea. Thank you, sensei, replied Minato, getting a small smile from Jiraiya as he too began to walk off. No problem, Minato, who knows? Maybe I might be able to teach the brat a thing or two. Finished off the man as he too disappeared in a plump of smoke, leaving the Namikaze family behind to talk. Looking over towards his wife, Minato let out a small smile. I think, even if Naruto is technically out of our family, there is still a chance to get him back, but maybe later on. Let's now just try to get as close as we can as people first. With the way Naruto is, being older mentally he can understand how we feel. I noticed it, but he's been friendlier towards us, trying to form a stable connection between us as people. So, for now I think that's the right way to go about bringing our son back. Spoke Minato as he stared into his wife's eyes, getting a nod from Kushina as she let out a small, but happy smile. Yeah, at least this way, we still have him somewhat close. And who knows, maybe later on we can be a complete family once again. But for the time being, this is fine. It's good to know he has given us a small chance. Replied Kushina, a small tear building in the corner of her eye as she hugged her husband, who also let out a small smile as he held his wife before looking over towards his two daughters. Kasumi-chan, Mito-chan, from this point on, your training in the Kyuubi's chakra will accelerate, alongside your training. Starting tomorrow, I will be pushing the two of you in just about everything both myself and your mother can do. So, we're going to need you two to try your hardest if you want to catch up to your brother. Is that fine? Asked Minato, getting two nods from his determined daughters. Hai-tu-san, shouted the two, more so Mito than Kasumi, who was stealing brief glances towards the massive crater across the training ground. I won't lose to you, Naruto, thought Kasumi with a determined fire within her eyes. With Naruto, not bad, I'm pretty sure I can get the jutsu Jiraiya had given me in a day in the mindscape, and as for the Hiraishin, it shouldn't take me longer than a month of mindscape time with numerous amounts of Kage Bunshin helping me create my own variant of the Hiraishin. Muttered Naruto softly as he made his way through the village, ignoring all the stares he gained as he strode through the crowds with his white jacket fluttering slightly in its unzipped form as he glanced down towards the scroll in his hand. A small scroll that held 3 gifts for a certain trio of Uchiha who had burrowed their way into his heart. Hope they enjoy the gifts I got them. Muttered Naruto softly with a smile as he glanced up before greeting an Uchiha gate guard, of which gave him a returning wave and smile. Morning Ichiro, how's the family? Questioned Naruto, getting a smile from the man as he gave a small shrug. As well as most these days I guess, but, ever since the Uchiha massacre, I can honestly tell that things have been getting better and better for us. Not instantly, but it's been changing over the last couple of years. I could have only wished some of the other members were here to witness it themselves. Replied the man as he opened the gate for Naruto to enter, giving another friendly nod. Naruto continued on his way. Muttering a quick, I'm glad things are looking up, while moving past the man and into the complex. Looking at the pearl-colored walls and dirt path, Naruto couldn't help but smile as he watched 2 Uchiha kids run past him, playing tag before glancing up forwards to the sight of Satsuki, Sasuke and Makoto standing there waiting for him. Widening his smile, Naruto couldn't help but lower his head for a moment before raising it upwards, showing a small tear in his eye as he let out a small shout. I'm home. A few hours later, after having arrived home, as Naruto called it, the Hayabusa spent the majority of the night partying with the Uchiha family, sharing both laughs and embarrassing stories whilst also losing himself to the atmosphere the party had left off on him, making him relax around the Uchiha family as he shared moments with all 3 Uchiha, whether it was helping Makoto with the cooking, giving Sasuke a few personal C-rank fire jutsu, along with a chakra-conducting sword, which had confused him for a bit, and then giving Satsuki a couple of clothes, jutsu scrolls and his very own custom-made wire launcher he had created for the girl. As for Makoto, well, a multitude of clothing, a few specialized fuinjutsu seals to help her at home, and a photo of her, her children, and Naruto himself. No one could have prepared Naruto for the smothering hug and kiss on the cheek Makoto had given him, while Satsuki's similar kiss to the cheek was seen coming from a mile away. Naruto, at that point, made a comment about Sasuke doing it too, only to get a punch to the face from said teen, who later hugged Naruto in a brother-like manner. And through the entire time, Naruto hadn't lost his smile that he had gained when he first saw the family. All he thought of was how it felt to feel like he had belonged. And at that, he truly understood what it meant having something to die for, this connection he shared. Sure, in his own reality, he shared a similar connection with Satsuki and all, but it felt different this time around. It felt pure, it felt comforting beyond any doubt. And it made him feel safe. And it was during midnight that he decided it was time to bid farewell to the Uchiha family, knowing that Satsuki and Sasuke needed their rest for their team training tomorrow. But, as he was leaving, he felt Makoto drag him back through the door before shoving him into a spare room of theirs, saying it was too late at night for him to go to his new apartment across the village. Deciding not to fight with the woman, Naruto fell asleep happily, his last thoughts of the night being, "Tomorrow, I begin making a name for myself. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, and yes, 2 chapters in a single day, well, more 1 chapter for 2 stories each. But yeah, anyway, the story prologue is below this. Laters. Prologue. Dark windy night, countless faces going by like a blur, not even a single detail gained as more and more people moved, one person replacing another as they walked, no one indistinguishable, nothing outstanding or worth noticing, aside from the stench following those who hide within the alleyways of the city. Standing among the streets of Manhattan was a single man standing at that of little under 6 foot, being around 5 feet 10 or 5 feet 11. Messy short black hair, crimson eyes and a light tan complexion. Watching as the faces of many go by, the man couldn't help but snort as his crimson gaze settled upon the sight of a small group of teens grinning at him from the alley, all looking like they were the kings of the world with nothing that could oppose them. Walking forwards towards the small grinning group, the man didn't seem to care about the gazes of those around him, following his every movement as he walked past those without any faces. "Watch it. Look where you're going, idiot. Bastard. My coffee." The comments didn't matter. Neither did the wastes of space owners that complained in the first place. And as the comments continued, more and more faces began to stare, their eyes being drawn into the lone figure as he glided down the pathway to his destination, as they simply watched as the black-haired man kept his crimson gaze focused on a single objective, a single goal, a single target. Moving past the crowd and into the darkened maroon-colored alleyway, the man continued moving forwards, following the trail of those who dared to challenge him, as his face briefly became clear at the sight of a broken light flickering on and off as he continued his slow glide-like walk through the alleyway. Not long, a single turn of a corner and the sight of a small group of elder teenagers greeted the man. All giving him the same grins and looks of confidence that caused his eyes to glow ever so briefly within the darkness of the alleyway. The sound of a chuckle rung throughout the alleyway as a single teenager moved in front of his comrades as he stood as menacing as he possibly could. Blonde hair, green eyes, school jacket slung over his shoulder, showing a student shirt beneath getting slightly wet from the light drizzle of rain that was slowly starting to pour down from up above. The teenager grinned as he walked forwards. His hands safely lodged into his pockets as he raised his head up slightly, a confident smirk taking over his original grin as he did so. "Ah, so you're the so-called devil. Funny how rather lackluster you look," shouted the teen, his voice rallying his friends who stood up to support him. Funny enough, they seemed to be perfect clones of the teen. Giving a blank crimson stare, the man continued on his path forwards, not bothering with any comments as he moved ever so slowly towards his prey. The teen continued, his voice booming around the alleyway as he stood confident with his pearly white teeth out on display for the crimson-eyed man to see. "Supposed devil is said to be the king. The project's prized possession. But you look like nothing more than a deadbeat loser," shouted the man, laughing as he did so as he moved his head around, making an audible crack run throughout the otherwise silent alley. Not a single moment later did the man feel the cold texture of a black leather jacket brush past his neck before tightly surrounding his throat. The teen widened his eyes in utter shock as his gaze slowly drifted downwards towards his neck, or as much as he could move his head, before the sight of the same black leather jacket the red-eyed man had was now securely wrapped around his neck. A single moment of silence had pasted, only to soon be replaced by a single loud snapping sound which then ran throughout the silent alleyway. However, as the original sound only lasted a single second, the aftershocks of the sound continued throughout the alleyway, being projected by its compact area. "Run!" shouted a multitude of voices as they desperately attempted to move away from the descending flames, only to be soon swept up in the heat and fire, burning their bodies, and their beings, into crisps of ash seconds after the impact. Cutting off the jutsu as Naruto landed on a scorched ground, the crimson-eyed teen narrowed his eyes before holding a single hand across his body before suddenly winging it out towards the untouched trees ahead of him. "Wind style. Wind blade," muttered the teen, sending a single long blade of wind out towards the trees, which soon began to plummet as they were cleanly cut from the wind blade generated from Naruto's hand moments ago. Ah! Not long did the screams take to reach the teen's ears as he began to walk towards the origins of the sound. And the sight that greeted him. 5 or so bandits with their lower bodies sliced off and their organs spilling out from their torsos. Giving a small bored look, the teen crouched down slowly before he began to channel earth-natured chakra into the ground. "Earth style. Swamp of the underworld," finished off Naruto in a bored tone, watching as the bodies of all the sliced-up bandits disappear into the ground along with the trees that surrounded them. Watching as the last of the bandits sank into the ground, Naruto stood himself up before letting out a tired sigh, absent-minded stretching his back as he did so. "Well, the earth-style technique Jiraiya gave me is now usable. Who knew it was actually harder for me to make a small version of it rather than a larger one?" spoke Naruto absent-mindedly as he turned around and began walking towards the area he had set ablaze with his fire technique. Looking around the scorching area, which had a few flames flickering around, the teen quickly clapped his hands together before extruding a thick mist around him, which quickly began to sweep the area, taking down all forms of flames he had left behind before easily dispelling the mist. Looking around and making sure he hadn't caused any bushfires from his jutsu, Naruto gave himself a small satisfied nod before staring at a certain location in the once burning area, before letting out a small nod. "Okay, remove the barrier jutsu. All the enemies have been killed," spoke Naruto suddenly before watching as before his very eyes, an illusion-like barrier shattered, showing 2 other Narutos holding what appeared to be a multitude of women and children as they let out tears of joy and happiness from the bandits' deaths. Walking over towards the group, Naruto quickly gave a small head count before letting out a pleased smile. "Hello there. I'm Genin Naruto Hayabusa. I have been requested to find and retrieve you all while also eliminating the bandits that had originally captured you. Now, if we may, I would like to quickly return you all to your families back in your village. We should, at most, be an hour or 2 away, had we been walking at your pace. For now, however, I will be summoning a cluster of shadow clones to carry each and every one of you. Is that okay?" questioned Naruto, getting nervous nods from most of the women there, while the children gave bright smiles and nods. Widening his smile, Naruto brought his hands up into a T-shaped position before sending a pulse of chakra. "Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," muttered out Naruto as the sounds of over 50 clones appeared around the teen, each giving off their own smile as they moved to carry each person there. And within a few minutes, the battalion of Naruto clones soon set off, jumping from tree branch to tree branch, causing a few of the civilians to either let out whoops of joy, or small gasps of fear. Now, what would have taken over an hour of travel originally, at a civilian's walking speed at least, had only taken Naruto a total of 5 minutes at tree hopping. It was in those 5 minutes that those who had been kidnapped had gained the sight of their village and their grief-stricken loved ones, whom of which charged towards the safely held families which were quick to get out of Naruto's clones' grasp as they hugged the dear life out of their loved ones. Dispelling his clones, the black-haired teen couldn't help but lean off towards the side as he watched everyone reconnecting with their loved ones, who had apparently been kidnapped over a week ago. The bandits weren't all that smart to have been in an area not all too far from the village they had ransacked. Honestly, it made his job that much easier to complete. Shaking his head at how easy the mission had been, the teen laid his head against the wooden wall he had propped his head against before taking in a slow breath before exhaling it. "I believe this is yours, young man," spoke a wise voice besides Naruto's form. Opening his eyes and glancing down slightly, Naruto came upon the sight of an old man with a small walking stick held within his grasp. The man, probably in the age between his late 60s and early 70s, gave him a toothy grin, showing his seemingly perfect white teeth before handing Naruto an envelope. Opening it up, the teen gave a small nod of its contents before pushing himself off the wall with a smile. "Thank you, Gigi-san, for signing the document stating I had completed my mission. I'll be on my way now then," replied Naruto, giving a small bow to the elder before moving on towards the front entrance of the tiny village before suddenly stopping himself as he looked back towards the elder. Giving a slightly serious stare, the teen tilted his head a bit. "You know, Elder-san, if you would like, I could set up a wall to surround the village to give it some additional protection from future bandit raids. And maybe I could also incorporate seals to further keep the village safe if you would like," spoke Naruto, getting a slightly startled look from the man as he narrowed his eyes. "And for what reason would you do that, Hayabusa-kun? If it's to gain more money, then I'll have to decline your offer. Even if it would protect us, it would simply be too costly for our small village," replied the elder, only to get a small wave from Naruto as he let out a small smile as he dragged his eyes back towards the happy children and tearing women before returning his eyes back towards the elder. "It's not for any monetary gain, Elder-san. It's more for that. I wouldn't like to leave this place knowing I could help protect these people in some way, whether it's with a simple bit of earth released to build some walls, a couple of seals to help out, or even an illusion to place over the surrounding area to scare off people with negative intent." "So, would that be fine, Elder-san?" questioned Naruto softly as he returned his eyes to the happy families who were now celebrating with each other. Watching Naruto with keen eyes, the elder couldn't help but let a small smile break onto his face before giving a small nod. "Very well, Hayabusa-kun. If you wish to help us, who am I to complain? But I must ask you not to place a wall, as it would seem to those who wish to cause us harm that we are more well off than we are, making us a target to local bandits," replied the man, getting a small nod from the teen as he crossed his arms against his chest while looking up towards the still blue sky above. In that case, I can use an illusion seal, one of which will activated when negative intent is found and directed towards this location. Doing so, the seal would then create illusions, such as wolves, bears and other predators to intimidate the attacking party, which would then most likely send them away. Is that fine, Elder-san?" asked Naruto, returning his gaze towards the kind old man who seemed ecstatic over the idea, if the show of him clapping and nodding his head like a bobblehead said anything to the teen. "That would be lovely, Hayabusa-kun. However, isn't that pretty difficult to do? As I've heard that Fuinjutsu is such a delicate art, there are only a handful of masters capable to do what you have just described," questioned the elder in a soft tone, only to watch as Naruto pulled the sleeves up on his white jacket before giving a thumbs up and grin combo. "Well, it's your lucky day then. I happen to be one of those supposed rare seal masters," replied Naruto with a grin as he moved away from the building for a moment and stood somewhere near the center of the village before clapping his hands together while shutting his eyes. Keeping his eyes closed as he focused on creating the seal, the teen drew in a long breath of air for a moment, before opening his eyes as wide as he could before slamming his palms into the ground, causing a large surge of black ink to seemingly spread from his position to somewhere outside of the village. Fuin. Illusion barrier, shouted the teen as he seemingly started to glow a pale silver color for a moment, which then soon began to seep into the seal he had created that spanned a radius of over 2 miles from the village center. Giving a small grin as he felt the yin-natured energy seep into the seal, the blonde-haired teen quickly lifted a single arm up to his forehead before brushing the small bit of sweat off his brow before giving a thumbs up towards the stunned elder. And there you go, an illusion seal that will ward off anyone directing negative intent towards the village itself. You should be safe from most, if not all bandits and even lower-level ninjas if you're lucky enough. Replied Naruto with a wide smile, getting a bow from the elder in return. Thank you Hayabusa-sama. I personally thank you on behalf of all my villagers for what you have done in order to protect us. Returned the elder, only to get a small sigh from Naruto as he scratched the back of his head while giving a small wave with his free hand. It's fine Elder-san. If anything, being able to utilize my skills at random points in time only keep them sharp and allow me to keep my skills up to a certain level. You wouldn't believe how uncommon it is for me to actually use any fuinjutsu since barely anyone knows I have access to it at such a high level. Replied Naruto in an embarrassed tone as he suddenly stiffened for a moment before giving the elder another smile. Well, it seems that my clone has gotten me another C-rank jutsu from Hokage-sama, who should be delivering the client to me in a matter of minutes with a cage bunshin. Spoke Naruto absent-minded as he reached into his pocket, or more specifically the seal in his pocket, before pulling out a tri-bladed kunai with a special seal tag wrapped around the handle. Seeing the blade, the elder let out a small gasp. Is that one of the legendary kunai that the fourth Hokage uses for his legendary Hiraishin technique? Asked the man in a tone of awe, only to get a shake of the head from Naruto as he raised the kunai up by the small rounded loop that was at the end of the kunai. Close, but no. This, while indeed is the Hokage's kunai, doesn't have the full inscription of the Hiraishin written onto it. In fact, it's only a one-way transportation. So, he can appear to me, but can't directly use the kunai itself. He decided to give me this after a few days of me seemingly completing C-rank missions and returning back to Konoha, only to request another and to pick up my clients whether or not it was an escort or protection mission. So, instead of me going back and forth, I have a clone waiting for me to pass on knowledge that I would like a new mission, of which he would ask the Hokage, who would in turn send a cage bunshin of himself, alongside my client or mission scroll, allowing me to continue missions should I complete them quick enough. Replied Naruto with a small smile as he threw the kunai just in front of him before wrapping his arms around his chest. Honestly, it's probably due to how powerful I am for a genin that he trusts me in doing this. He also knows that I am well supplied since I carry a lot of equipment in my seals, which lets me have more freedom should he need me to stay in a location for a certain amount of time. So far the max has been a couple of hours, but who knows? Finished off Naruto with a small shrug of his shoulders as he watched as a flash of yellow appeared in his vision, showing the Yondaime Hokage holding what appeared to be a man garbed in fishing clothes with a small towel wrapped around his neck. The man, seeing the blonde-haired kid, immediately began to growl as he moved his eyes around. Very funny Hokage-sama. Now, where is the team I have protecting me for the mission I had requested? Questioned the man, gaining a small smile from Minato as he nudged his head over towards Naruto. You're looking at him. Meet Naruto Hayabusa, one of the best, if not the best genin in Konoha, and dare I say it, in the elemental nations. Replied Minato with a wide smile, before tossing a scroll towards Naruto, who nodded before throwing his own scroll to the clone, which then read the contents before giving a small nod. Seems like another C rank completed. Good job Naruto, I'll have a toad come and gain the documents in a couple of minutes. You are cleared to continue with your new mission Naruto, but remember to feel free to request any help should you encounter anything too difficult for yourself. Finished off Minato with a smile before disappearing in a puff of smoke, leaving Naruto alongside an elder and grumpy man, who was now glaring towards Naruto. What the hell is the Hokage thinking? Why in the world should someone as super as myself have to be stuck with a brat who probably couldn't fight off a little paper bag? Shouted the man in anger as he crossed his arms. I should have went to Kumo. Screw it being a longer trip, at least I would have a super good protection squad. Replied the man in anger and sadness, only to get smacked in the head by the elder as he gave the fisher-looking guy a glare. I don't know what your problem is, young man. But, the sheer fact you seem to be snubbing off your protection isn't exactly a very good way of forming a connection that would warrant any form of protection. And as for this child fighting off a paper bag, he had just saved all the women and children that had been kidnapped over a week ago by a multitude of bandits raging between the tens to hundreds. If that doesn't convince you, then I don't know what will. Grumbled the elder as he glared into the man's eyes, of which slowly began to fall as he glanced over towards Naruto once again. Is that true, kid? Because with all the luck me and my village has been having, we could use a miracle child. Replied the man tiredly, getting a small smile from Naruto, who shook his head before giving a soft smile towards the man. I can tell. You just look the part of a man trying to save a dying village with all that you are, don't worry. I can guarantee you that I can protect you from just about anything, so put your faith in me. Spoke Naruto with a smile as he held his hand out towards the fisher-like man, who gave a small resigned smile before shaking Naruto's hand. I, along my village, will be in your care then, kid. The name's Tazuna, by the way. Replied the man, getting a nod from Naruto as he turned his head slightly towards the direction of Wave. Very well, Tazuna-san. I'll make sure to live up to your super expectations by taking care of not only you, but your village as well. Speaking of which, we aren't all that far from your village, maybe another hour of travel should I carry you there. Replied Naruto, getting a small nod from the man, before he gave the small blonde a stare. And how do you propose to carry me there? Asked the man, only to get a grin from Naruto. Oh, you know, this way and that. 1 hour later. See, Tazuna-san. That wasn't so bad. Chuckled out Naruto as he watched Tazuna simply glare at him as he sat on the ground while taking in a deep breath at the sheer speed the small kid had gone when running. Kid, if you ever quit the ninja business, go into races. I'll be betting on you each and every time. Replied the man in a tired voice before lying flat against the ground, with Naruto simply giving a chuckle out as he shrugged his shoulders. Nah, it would be too unfair for anyone versing me in a test of speed. Remarked Naruto briefly before glancing over towards the large body of water that separated both him and Tazuna from the Wave Village. And considering he felt a large chakra source nearby, Naruto decided now was the time to continue on their way. Moving himself up from his sitting position, the teen held his hand out towards Tazuna with a small smirk. Well, since we're not too far out from the village, I guess you can stomach me carrying you again for a bit longer. Asked Naruto in a cheeky tone, getting a small groan in return before the man grasped Naruto's hand before being tugged up by the teen, who then placed the man in a piggyback position before giving out a resigned sigh. Go, kid, mumbled the man in irritation, only to feel the sudden feeling of wind brushing his face as the slight splatter of water droplets hitting his ankles as he slowly opened his eyes to watch Naruto running across the water. Shaking his head at the unbelievable sight, the man fell silent as he watched his village come closer and closer before finally Naruto jumped up high into the air before landing on a railing of an incomplete bridge. Having people who were working give him a startled look, the blonde-haired teen simply gave a small wave while placing down Tazuna onto the concrete floor. Hi there. Genin Naruto Hayabusa, reporting for duty. Spoke Naruto with a tiny salute, only to sweat drop as everyone seemed to simply stare at him in silence. That was until Tazuna coughed into his hand, drawing everyone's attention as he pointed over towards Naruto. This brat is our protection. Now, I know he doesn't look like much, but believe me, this kid could put even Super Jonin Ninja in their places, from what I heard via brat, so we can now continue on with building the bridge with super protection. Spoke Tazuna with a thumbs up and smile. Only to watch as a few people seemed to drop what they were working on before walking away, startling the super bridge builder in silence before one of the workers who were leaving stopped and gave Tazuna a glare. You know how we scraped whatever we could so you could get us a real shinobi group to protect us, and yet, you crushed our hope Tazuna with this brat. Gato will kill us by the end of the week. Look, we have families and we can't risk so much just for a small blonde-haired brat to protect us, I'm sorry. Replied the man, walking away from the group of workers, who now had similar thoughts in their heads, before the sound of a cough escaped Naruto's throat, giving everyone's attention towards him. Still sitting crouched on the bridge's railing, Naruto shook his head before placing his hands into a certain hand signs. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu! Shouted the teen as in a flurry of seconds, the entire bridge was soon occupied with white-jacketed Narutos, who each began to grab a multitude of tools with smirks upon their faces. Gaining a similar smirk to his own clones, Naruto gave a small wink towards the workers. Believe what you want about me. Whether your pride won't let you believe a kid like myself can handle any threats you seem to warrant for trying to live your own lives, but I promise, I can and will protect everyone within this village. And while I'm at it, I might as well use my construction skills to help you all out, so what do you say? Questioned Naruto rhetorically as everyone stood stunned at Naruto's brief speech, before a few began to let out large smiles while moving their eyes over towards Tazuna. Okay boss, what's the plan? Questioned the men as they watched Tazuna gain a wide smile himself. Continue what we were previously doing, each person here take 5 brats here to help them on their project, meanwhile the rest of the kids' clones will help further the progress, let's get moving people. The bridge could possibly be completed in a few days if we push for it. Shouted Tazuna, causing a roar of cheers to run through the once silent bridge before